Chapter 1. Living from Intuition. Intuition is the ability to understand something instantly, without the need for conscious reasoning. The dictionary lists these synonyms: hunch, foreknowledge, inspiration, perceptivity, premonition, presentiment, gut feeling, innate knowledge, and insight. It also lists the following synonyms, although these are actually different than intuition: clairvoyance, second sight, sixth sense, discernment, gut feeling, and instinct. As humans evolve to their next higher version, they'll live more from intuition than the old body-mind reactions. As we progress from animal consciousness, survival, to intellectual consciousness, information, and finally to spiritual consciousness, intuition, we place more trust in cosmic intelligence. Contrary to popular belief, intuition is more accurate than any other source. I owe much of my own success and happiness to it. Many of my decisions are made in contradiction to normal reasoning. The purpose of this audiobook is to look at intuition from many different angles so that you can attain a clear sense of this precious gift and take a leap to higher consciousness. Intuition does not explain or justify. It only points the way. Because it does not follow earthly logic, it doesn't always look reasonable. It is whisper soft. It says, that direction, or this direction. Sometimes it's drowned out by the noise of daily life and the circus of the mind, but in a state of calm, it can be heard just fine. Intuition is information from a higher perspective. It sees the big picture pattern. If you are a small character within a picture, you can't see the big picture. As that small character, you might think that event X is bad, but seen from a broader perspective, you may someday realize that without event X, a good event, let's call it event Y, could have never happened. For example, as a teenager, I was fired from my first job selling sports shoes. My parents considered this a disaster. I considered it a blessing. I intuitively felt my life was for something far greater than selling sports shoes. Had I kept the job, I might still be working as a retailer today instead of being the author of 25 books and touring the world doing seminars. I recall not changing lanes on the highway once, although someone was flashing his headlights for me to let him pass. I normally always move for faster cars, but not this time. My girlfriend asked, "Why don't you get out of the way? Someone wants to pass." This question was answered the very moment a car suddenly veered from the lane I was in to the second lane where I would have been had I switched. The accident would have been deadly. I gleefully responded, "That's why." These kinds of insights happen when the mind is serene. You just know. People demand explanations, but you just know. The heart knows long before the mind does. A split second before you start thinking, intuition already knows. Once thinking begins, instant knowing is gone. This understanding is useful if you want to learn languages, computer skills, play tennis, choose a partner, knowing the next course of action, truth from lies, reading the energy of people, places, and things. Anything, really. Have you ever heard a professional athlete say, "The moment I start thinking, I lose the game"? That's because high-performance people operate on what they've programmed their subconscious with, as well as a touch of intuition, neither of which require conscious thinking. It is commonly assumed that thinking equals intelligence, but I say that's a mistaken notion. Working as a coach in the field of self-improvement for 25 years has taught me that most problems are caused by too much thinking, while disregarding innate knowing. You already have this inner knowing, and too much reliance on knowledge, including knowledge of this author, is not only unnecessary, but a veil that blocks out your own light. In my life, the instant I receive an email from someone asking to do business, I intuitively know whether I want to deal with them before finding out more about the person, checking Google, or even a face-to-face meeting. The instant new software is in front of me, I intuitively click around to learn how it works. The instant someone offers me a great investment in the stock market, I can tell whether it will work or not. The very instant someone hands me a book, I can tell if it's good for me or not. And so can you. How? by taking the first flash of insight, the very split second before thinking starts, and trusting it. There is nothing your higher self doesn't know. It's the lower self, the ego, blinded by aversions, desires, confusions, and loads of indoctrinated beliefs, that is perpetually perplexed. If you were to rely on intuition, you could grasp some subjects that normally take years to learn in only a few seconds. For example, I was never at all interested in the stock market, never read books or magazines on it, wasn't interested in speaking to an expert, and still the stocks I do have work very well for me. Intuition is a great time saver. At our current evolutionary level, intuition is not yet well developed within most of us. We only catch glimpses of this higher intelligence beyond the outer rims of our human grasp. Many don't believe this ability even exists. Doing a search on the internet, one finds the popular belief that intuition is not always accurate. It cannot be relied upon. My rebuttal to this, if it's inaccurate, then it's not intuition. If there's a question you don't know the answer to, respond quickly and spontaneously, because the moment you start thinking, intuition is already gone, drowned out by the analyzing mind. You can get a sense of a person's overall state at the very moment you meet him or her, unless you start thinking. Then you've already lost it. Trying to hear the soft voice of intuition with a turbulent mind is like trying to hear a pin drop at a rock concert. In meditation, we seek the no-mind state of letting go of conceptual thought to reduce that noise. This allows everything to be apparent and obvious without the need to filter it through definitions. Not that thinking is a bad thing, it's just overrated. Much of our thinking is indoctrinated. Indoctrinated how? Through parenting. You take over all the positive and negative thoughts of your parents. Through schooling, you take over all the thoughts of the teachers and educators. Through mass media, you take over all the thoughts of a society. The more often you reside in states of no mind or less mind, the more you just know, and the less you rely on the distorted knowledge presented by the media and education. Intuition sometimes makes suggestions that others wouldn't understand if you explained it to them. I was at a seminar the other week, and a colleague of mine said I could have her balcony room because she was checking out. My room didn't have a balcony and was smaller. I said, "No, that's okay." Nonetheless, when she checked out, she told the receptionist to reserve the balcony room for me. And again, I said, "No, I'd like to keep my room." They didn't understand because the other room was so much better. How could I explain to them that I'm keeping the room because it's room 160? You see, 160 adds up to 7. No big deal, right? But my hotel room before that in another city was number 34, which adds up to 7. And the room before that was 205, which also adds up to 7. I kid you not, the room before that was 232. I understood that rather than being a coincidence, it was indicative of being in some kind of higher pattern. Call me superstitious, but changing my room would have broken my positive flow. My ways are mysterious because they are guided by intuition and synchronicity, not by what one would normally expect. I do things for my own reasons, not the world's reasons, and that has always served me well. Anywhere there is too much information and too much complexity, I disregard it and instead rely on intuition. I've started making a list of paranormal or intuitive events that have happened to me, and just this year alone, I count 30 unexplainable events. Just one example from the list. I once fell asleep thinking about shooting a gun. My girlfriend suddenly woke up and said, "I heard a gunshot." I told her, yes, I was just thinking about shooting a gun for some reason. She had telepathically picked up on my imagination because she was asleep. Deep relaxation and sleep are highly receptive states to intuition and clairvoyance. Some of the items on my list are so out of the world that I hesitate to write about them. People have shaken their heads in disbelief and dismissed those ideas just because some of my stories have been too far out. However, for intuitive people, the magical is a common, everyday occurrence. There are only two ways of having complete knowledge about something. First, examine it from hundreds of different viewpoints and study every single aspect and detail of it. Or, second, simply let go of mind and thought to receive and pick up intuitive knowing.